The EPA and the Navajo Nation have agreed to clean up a uranium mine located near Gallup. The question now remains, how long will it take and how much will it cost? And students at Jimmy Carter Middle School participated in a special event to honor the late president's life. Plus, the New Mexico United announced their new head coach today. Albuquerque Journal reporter Ken Singinger was at the introductory press conference and joins me to discuss what fans can expect from the Yellow and Black's new head man. It's January 9th, 2025. I'm Gino Gutierrez, and I'll have more on those stories in a few moments, plus a look at the newsroom's other headlines and Albuquerque's weather forecast, coming up on the Leading News. The EPA and the Navajo Nation have finalized a plan to move uranium mine waste, but where is it coming from and where is it going to go? To answer those questions, we now turn to Albuquerque Journal reporter Kathy Cook, who's been following this story. Kathy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kathy, this agreed-upon plan for the Navajo Nation and the EPA will move this uranium mine waste, but where's the source and where's it going to go?
So this is mine waste from the Quivira mine site, which is northeast of Gallup. So it's in northern New Mexico. It's on the Navajo Nation, and it's been there since at least the 1980s. And so they're moving it to a as yet unbuilt, it will be built soon, waste depository specifically for holding this uranium mine waste that's going to be near Thoreau, New Mexico.
And it's my understanding, Kathy, that you mentioned in your story the health concerns that this uranium mine waste posed to the community. What exactly were those risks?
Yeah, so where it is now, there's been a lot of erosion. The way that it's contained now is not the best, and it hasn't always been maintained. So there is some health risk to the community. When you have uranium mine waste, uranium is part of that waste. Low levels of uranium, although it's higher levels than they would want it to be, ideally, for it to be sitting out there. And uranium can cause kidney damage. It may contribute to developing lung cancer. So it causes really significant long-term health effects for people who are exposed. And there's a ton of abandoned uranium mine sites on the Navajo Nation. So this is a huge problem for the Navajo Nation and a huge problem for New Mexico and the Southwest. And so it's really exciting to have, for the people who have been advocating for this particular waste site to get cleaned up, to have a place in the works to put this waste.
So, Kathy, this is going to be no small feat to move this amount of uranium waste, and you mentioned earlier that the site that it's going to has yet to be built. So how long is this going to take, and how much is this going to cost?
So it is supposed to take 6 to 8 years. That's the EPA's estimate. Now, one of the advocates with a community group who I spoke with thinks it'll take more like 10 years. We'll see what happens. And then in terms of cost, the EPA is estimating that the EPA is allowed to spend up to $183 million on this removal process. And that money is coming from a settlement with a mining company that's earmarked for cleaning up uranium mine waste.
And Kathy, it's my understanding that you received a statement from an advocate with the Redwater Pond Road Community Association. What did they say about this uranium cleanup operation?
She was very excited in her comments. She feels like the community is getting a real win in having this waste finally moved. This is considered a higher risk mine site because it has higher concentrations of uranium and because it's so close to Navajo communities. Like, there's a house, the EPA told me that one of the households is 700 feet away from one of the waste piles.
And Kathy, we've touched on it a couple times throughout this interview, but once this new disposal site is built, who's going to be in charge of managing it?
So there's a company that already manages a landfill near Thoreau that will be building it. They are called the Northwest New Mexico Regional Solid Waste Authority. They own the land that the depository is going to be built on. And then there's a New Mexico State Department, the Environment Department, that will also monitor that site.
So some good news for the residents on the Navajo Nation near this mine that this cleanup effort is now going to get off the ground. Albuquerque Journal reporter Kathy Cook with the latest on the story. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
In honor of their namesake, Students at Jimmy Carter Middle School participated in a special event on Wednesday meant to emulate the kindness and dedication to service the former president represented. Albuquerque Journal reporter Kevin Opsahl was there and joins me now to discuss what took place. Kevin, what kind of activities were the students doing?
Well, it was a group of about 24 students with a teacher who said she was born during the Carter administration. And she started out by talking about the name of the school. Jimmy Carter Middle School, which was dedicated in 2000, holds the distinction among the middle schools in Albuquerque as the only middle school named after a living president. And then the teacher talked about the legacy of Jimmy Carter, particularly his work with Habitat for Humanity and the Carter Center, not so much his presidency. And the students were treated to a video about Jimmy Carter's life, which included an interview with Jimmy Carter himself. And when the video was done, the teacher asked the students, what is a single word that comes to mind when you think of Jimmy Carter? And I heard words like kind, noble, persistent. And the teacher agreed that probably many in the general public who are saying goodbye to Jimmy Carter would probably use those words to describe him. And then she said, to honor Jimmy Carter, we are going to write letters of kindness to someone or a group of people in the school who either need encouragement or a word of appreciation. And the teacher gave them an example of her own letter she wrote to the cafeteria staff saying, you're all working to make the school a better place, just like Jimmy Carter did for the world. And you're feeding empty stomachs, which is not an easy thing to do. And so the students spent a couple minutes writing their letters on a single sheet of paper with a heart drawn on it. So their messages was written inside of a heart. And then after the activity, I interviewed these two students who told me that what they knew about Jimmy Carter and why they wrote the letters. So one student said she wrote a letter to the librarian because the librarian provided a safe space for her. The other student said she wrote a letter to the teacher teaching the lesson because she's just an incredibly helpful person in any situation. I also found it interesting that the students told me that they hope they lived to 100 as long as Jimmy Carter did. I just found that very refreshing because they're so young in their lives. They don't know what they want to do yet, but they want to live life to the fullest, and they just are undaunted by the decades that may come after them. So it was just a very heartwarming thing to witness, and it was truly inspiring because you had the students taking the initiative to write these letters of support against the backdrop of a man who has such decency and integrity.
So, Kevin, sounds like it was a very, very impactful day at Jimmy Carter Middle School as they remember the late president. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
Thank you, Gino.
In an introductory press conference that was held on Wednesday, New Mexico United head coach Dennis Sanchez officially introduced himself to the community. Sanchez, who served last year as the head coach of the Las Vegas Lights FC, made the jump to the black and yellow during the offseason. I'm now joined by Albuquerque Journal reporter Ken Siginger, who covers the United for the paper and was at the press conference today. Ken, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So, Ken, what can you tell us about the new head man for the New Mexico United?
Seems like an up-and-comer to me, Gino. I think he's only 37. Last year was his first year as a head coach, and he really accomplished way more than anybody thought he could at Las Vegas Lights FC. And as ironically was the guy that knocked United out of the playoffs in the second round with a win here. But I think people saw what he did in one season with that franchise, and they just have expectations that he could do even more here.
And Ken, you were at Sanchez's introductory press conference today. What did you glean from that?
Yeah, he came across very well. I mean, I think he's pretty excited about inheriting a good foundation here with United because he really didn't have that with Las Vegas. they were coming off a year where they won 3 games and had very few players signed, and he was really hired very late in the process. So here he comes in, and they've got a good core of players already in place. So I feel like he's pretty confident, but that's the way he came across. He's embracing the pressure because he knows the expectations are high here.
And Ken, you mentioned it. The expectations surrounding this team are very high when you take into account that the previous head coaches have gone on to coach at higher levels of soccer. Plus, this is really just a franchise that is hungry for postseason success. This is a fan base that really expects postseason success. So how is Sanchez embracing the pressure?
Yeah, it's funny because he mentioned that, and the owner CEO, Peter Trevisani, also mentioned that today. And I don't think he's shying away from that at all. I think he realizes that, last year he wasn't really expected to do anything, and they exceeded expectations by a lot. But that's not going to be the case here. Eric Quill was very successful, and of course now he's moved on to FC Dallas. But the people are expecting him to do just as well.
And Ken, really first things first for Sanchez is building up this roster as he heads into his first season as head coach for the United. You had Harry Schwartz, kind of a cornerstone of the franchise, opt in for retirement this offseason. So how does the new coach begin to approach building this roster into something he would like to see?
Well, I think they do have some very key players back. I mean, I think guys like Daniel Bruce that's been here from the beginning and is extremely popular. He kind of knows the lay of the land. And they've got a couple of guys that they brought in just last year with McCullough and some of the other guys that have stepped up and played well. So they've got a little bit of that veteran core about them. But he talked today about wanting to have some younger players too, and have some guys that will push these returning players to take that next step. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do over the next couple of weeks, because obviously they still have some roster spots to fill. But I feel like, they're not that many players away from being very competitive.
So new United coach Dennis Sanchez will look to build up a roster as he heads into his first season as the head man for the Black and Yellow here in New Mexico. Albuquerque Journal reporter Ken Sigginger with the latest on the United's new head coach. Ken, thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Gino. Have a good day.
In other headlines from the newsroom, Senator Martin Heinrich, a ranking member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, is protesting the confirmation hearing for President-elect Trump's Interior Secretary nominee, former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. The hearing is scheduled for January 14th. Heinrich criticized the lack of minority party consent and Burgum's incomplete paperwork, while the committee's chair, Senator Mike Lee, defended the hearing's timings, accusing Heinrich of delaying the process despite Burgum's recent submission of the necessary documents. The Garcia Automotive Group family donated $1 million to the Albuquerque Academy, splitting the funds between a renamed summer program, now known as the Vincent Cordova Summer Scholars Program, and improvements to the school's tennis courts, now named the Darrell Gage Courts. The donation honors the legacies of Vincent Cordova, who was a former teacher and coach, and Darrell Gage, a celebrated tennis coach. And New Mexico State Police released dashcam footage showing Jesus Rubio appearing to take a shooting stance during a traffic stop in Hobbs before officers shot him on Monday. Rubio later died at a hospital, no weapon was found, and the 2 officers involved are now on administrative leave as the investigation continues. Looking for something to do today? Concerts at the library are taking place at the International District Library from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Interested in making a Lunar New Year snack? You can do so at the Lomas Tramway Public Library from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect scattered snow showers after 8 p.m., cloudy with a high near 38. As for this evening, more scattered snow showers are expected before 8 p.m., cloudy with a low around 15. Then looking ahead to tomorrow, sunny skies are expected in the forecast with a high near 39, before temperatures dip down to 17 degrees in the evening. If you enjoyed the stories you heard today, please check our show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription to the Albuquerque Journal. To keep up with all the latest news from the Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. For the leading news, I'm Gino Gutierrez.